Picture this. You've just been through one of the bloodiest battles you've ever seen. The days of the battle had been brutally hot, the sun boiling relentlessly overhead, and not even the whisper of a breeze. The screaming of dying men and animals, the whistling of shells, the explosions of gun and cannon fire still echo in your ears, even hours after the battle has been over. Now all you want is to be away from this damned place. But there's no rest for you yet. Now the weather has shifted, the blazing blue sky growing threateningly dark before the clouds burst open. The rain comes down in sheets, and you're drenched in moments, the smell of wet wool clogging your nostrils. Thunder rolls like a stampeding bull overhead, drowning out the creak of the long wagon train slogging gracelessly through the muddy mountain pass. The retreat over this blasted mountain, you're starting to think of it as Mount Misery, was ordered earlier today. Now you've been sitting in the saddle for hours, soaked through and sullen, your horse's hooves sucking so deep into the mud you think it's a miracle she's able to keep going. Exhaustion is pulling at you. You've barely slept the last several nights. Fear of impending attack and the horrific images that appear behind your eyes every time you close your lids, not allowing you to surrender to the exhaustion pulling at your bones. As you sway along with your horse's movements, a brief thought floats through the front of your mind. At least you're here, and in a lot better condition than some of the men in these wagons. A shout brings you out of the hazy, almost trance you've been lulled into. Listening closer, you're pulled to full, sickening awareness as the shout becomes clear through the torrential downpour. Stop the wagons! There's a fight at the pass! Stop the wagons! I'm Christiana.
I'm Bree.
I'm Jacob.
And I'm Chris.
Settle in and brace for attack.
Because you're about to hear something strange.
Welcome to episode 19, Monterey Pass. All right, friends. So, want to give a shout out here to our two super special guests, Jacob and Chris.
Hi.
Hello.
You probably recognize Jacob if you've been listening along with us to our other episodes. He was here for us in episode 101, Ghosthunting.
Ghosthunting 101.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that. And Chris has never been here with us, but you've heard me talk about him in a couple of those episodes. I think I told your story Gettysburg in Ghosthunting 101, as well as in our Gettysburg episode.
Actually, Chris has been here. He was just very quiet in the corner while we were
that's true.
Yes.
Looking at us like we were insane. So, welcome back, friends. We're
Thank you.
excited to have y'all here.
Thank you.
Yes, I remember that.
How could I forget?
What do you guys know about Monterey Pass?
I really don't know anything.
Awesome.
I never even heard of it. So I'm really looking forward to learning about this.
Cool.
It directly followed the Battle of Gettysburg, correct?
Yes.
That is
Literally directly after.
That is the extent of my knowledge.
Okay.
I know some. I'm not super well versed on it, but being a historian local to the area, I know some about it. I guess I'll be chiming in a little bit here and there.
Yeah. I convinced him to come on with us at the last minute.
Twisted my arm.
So I do want to give a couple trigger warnings for this one. Death, of course, because it is a very confusing battle, as well as animal death. We'll get to that a little later, but just a heads up. Brief overview of the Battle of Monterey Pass. This battle, as we said, happened directly after the Battle of Gettysburg. It's a pretty unknown battle by a lot of people. It was an engagement fought the night of July 4th into the morning of July 5th, 1863. This happened when the Confederate troops were retreating from the massive battle at Gettysburg. The wagon trains were attacked along the, it's spelled like Maria Furnace Trail, but it is actually Mariah Furnace Trail Road.
Man, I've been saying that wrong.
Chris pointed that one out to me. Along the Monterey Pass, which is a pass through the mountains. We're going to get a little more into the geography later. And the battlefield is located close to Blue Ridge Summit per Google Maps, but it actually has a Waynesboro address because I used the Battlefield Park website for a lot of this research.
I actually did a lot of visits following the route, kind of accidentally. We just kind of
Yes.
went for a drive one day.
yeah, we ended up going to the battlefield park so that I could research some of this because I got really into it. And I also want everyone to keep this in mind because I kept forgetting it when I was researching it. This battle happened in a torrential thunderstorm, like downpouring the whole time.
In the middle of the night.
In the middle of the night.
That sounds awful.
Yes, it was just chaotic. It was
not only do you have the thunder going, but then you have the cannons going at the same time, and it's got to be chaos.
Yeah, and if you think like it's a thunderstorm, right? So it's clouded over, it's black as pitch, you're in the mountains. This was a very confusing, just chaotic mess. It was a nightmare. So I'm going to start our journey here on the morning of July 4th, 1863. This is the morning after the third day of the Battle of Gettysburg. Leader of the Confederate Army, Robert E. Lee, ordered his troops to retreat. At this point, he had 50,000 troops remaining after the three-day battle. He also needed to withdraw the wounded people, the weapons, munitions, supplies, cattle. This was not going to be an easy process.
The cattle?
Yes, because they would...
What, would they taking the cattle with them for like...
Mm-hmm.
Okay, for like supplies and...
Yeah, like...
Well, that and the other thing was, it was very common at that time for invading armies to requisition or... air quotations, purchase livestock or supplies from farms. But the problem was back then, when the Confederacy invaded the North, they would pay with Confederate script, which in Pennsylvania was worthless. But they told the people, hey, here's this worthless money, but when we win the war, finally, you'll be able to use this money.
Yeah.
Basically, it was stealing in a polite way, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And you have an interesting story about that, if you're okay telling it
that's fine.
A little later.
Yeah, later on.
There would be two routes on this retreat back to the south, both of which met up in Hagerstown, Maryland, before continuing on to Williamsport, Maryland, to cross the Potomac River back into Virginia. And again, I will go into the geography of this to try and help it make a little more sense. Multiple routes of retreat were necessary due to the massive amount of supplies, animals, etc., that just needed to be taken out of this area. The first route would head northwest towards Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, before turning south and heading for Hagerstown, Maryland.
Basically 81 now.
Yes.
Or near 81.
Yes.
Pretty much, yeah.
The second route would head southwest through the town of Fairfield and through the Fairfield Mountain Pass along the Mariah Furnace Road through a mountain range known as South Mountain. Mariah Furnace Road would eventually meet the Waynesboro-Emmitsburg Turnpike, which was there at the time, and would continue southwest before crossing the Pennsylvania-Maryland border to head for Hagerstown. So a little bit of backstory here. Mariah Furnace Road was originally a packhorse trail known as the Great Wagon Road. It ran through Gettysburg and Fairfield before entering into South Mountain, this mountain range. After winding through South Mountain, it would connect to other forks of the Wagon Road at Williamsport, Maryland. Eventually, the trail widened and became a pretty regular route for migrants seeking to relocate to Appalachia. And Monterey Pass is situated along this road, the Mariah Furnace Road, where it met the turnpike. It's like right in that area. So I want to also go over some names that we're going to hear, because I was getting very confused with some of this, because it is just so many people that were at the Battle of Gettysburg, all converging in one place. So one name there's four of them here that I want to shout. General Judson Kilpatrick. He was the leader of a Union cavalry division under the brigades of General George Custer. You might know that.
Really?
Yes, he was under General Custer. Another name is Captain George Emack. He was the captain of the 1st Maryland Cavalry, so he was on the Confederate side. Captain William Tanner, who set up a cannon at the top of the mountain summit where this pass is located. And Brigadier General William Jones. He is the Confederate general that escorted General Ewell's wagon train.
Oh, hey, we talked about him.
I was going to say...
Did we figure out how to say his name for real this time?
Christopher helped me figure it
were
out.
we right?
Well, we were going back and forth whether it was Ewell or
Or
Yule.
Yule.
This was in the Gettysburg episode, and it is Yule. So,
Like Yuletide. Like,
yes.
Okay.
oh, yeah.
Back, yay.
He's back, yeah. So I want to go through the Confederate and the Union movements leading up to this battle to try and help it make sense how this clash occurred. So General Richard Ewell, hello, was in charge of the wagon train, the Confederate wagon train, heading through Fairfield and Monterey Pass. This wagon train, like I said, was escorted by General Jones. And under General Jones were certain companies of the 1st Maryland Cavalry, the full 6th and part of the 11th Virginia Cavalries, and 2 North Carolina Cavalry regiments.
I'm sorry, did you say Maryland?
1st Maryland, yes.
Interesting.
So that's where EMAC comes in.
Okay.
Because, like I said, I'm trying to like make all these pieces connect because it can get very like,
So
who's where.
one thing that's important to remember is Maryland was a border state at the time of the war,
Right.
and it was really interesting. You had a 1st Maryland US and a 1st Maryland CS. And
Interesting.
a lot
I
of
forgot
these
about that.
a lot of these men were all from the same areas, and a lot of them were related or knew each other, so forth and so on. And everyone was claiming, oh, well, Maryland's a Union state. No, Maryland's a Confederate state. It was a border state. It was technically still a part of the U.S. That's its own whole long story. Like I said, there was actually instances, I believe, shortly after all of this, where 1st Maryland US and 1st Maryland CS were fighting each other.
Yeah.
So it gets really, really confusing with all this kind of stuff. Anyway, go ahead and continue.
That's why I wanted you to just clarify that. I was like, Maryland, really?
Right. So this specifically was the Confederate 1st Maryland Cavalry.
Okay.
So
About how many people about how many soldiers do you know that if they had walking with them?
Generally, a company, at that time, a company was considered 100 men. And there were multiple companies in a regiment. But by this point, companies were depleted and they were down in their numbers, from previous fighting. Everyone was different at that point. Some companies may only have had, 20 or 30 or 40 men per regiment. They might have been down more than 50%.
Mm-hmm.
So at this exact time, I don't think we have exact
it would be
numbers.
called
Okay.
that. Sure. There were also parts of 2 different batteries assisting Captain EMAC as scouts and couriers.
Mm-hmm.
So again, Captain EMAC with the 1st Confederate Maryland Cavalry under General Jones.
Okay.
Here we go. And I want to put a quote in here from the Monterey Pass Battlefield Park and Museum. Quote, "Through the driving rain, General Ewell's wagon train rumbled out of Fairfield, traveling towards Jack's Mountain, taking a portion of Iron Springs Road, then through Fairfield Pass by way of Mariah Furnace Road to Monterey Pass.
Wow.
From there to Ringgold, and then on to Leitersburg." And here's where I'm going to give the context of the geography. Gettysburg itself and the Monterey Pass route are all pretty close to the Maryland-Pennsylvania border. In retreating from Gettysburg, the wagon train would be heading in a southwest direction to hit the town of Fairfield, Pennsylvania. Then it would go a little further southwest to where Monterey Pass is located. Once through that pass, they would cross the state border into Maryland and would reach the town of Ringgold and kept going, and this is Maryland, and then keep going until they hit the town of Leitersburg and eventually Hagerstown. So if you're looking at a map, if Gettysburg is like farthest to the right, you're going down and left a little bit and then dropping pretty sharply down.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going down, west, and then down.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And part of the reason for this was after the defeat at Gettysburg, they wanted to get some kind of natural barrier in between the retreating Confederate Army and the Union Army under General Meade, which was still over in Gettysburg.
Mm-hmm.
And South Mountain acted as that natural barrier because back then you don't have cell phones, you don't have satellite, you don't have high-speed internet, anything like that. Once you're out of sight, you're almost out of mind. You can't, it's hard to tell where somebody's at once you're out of line of sight.
That gives, I'm sorry.
And I guess the other thing to say here is that was also that was the shortest route trying to get back into more friendly territory.
Right.
So
That's
Even
the
though it was a shorter route, like it seems like a long.
it is.
Yeah.
It was very difficult
Shorter.
traveling.
shorter as the crow flies, but
Yeah.
Some of the trails in Michaud are through that area, right?
Yes.
So I can only imagine some of those on horseback after 3 days. Like
Oh.
6 hours in Michaud is a lot when you haven't fought in a 3-day battle.
Mhm.
Yeah.
and you're not getting drenched and,
And it's rocky AF up there too.
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
It's like, oh, I guess if we fall, we go together.
Yeah, truly. And that actually gives me a really good segue into the Union side of things.
Mhm.
After the Battle of Gettysburg, like Chris said, Union General Meade didn't want to directly attack the Confederate troops at Gettysburg again. He needed General Lee to stage a full retreat because that way he could say, like, the Union won this battle. He did, however, send out cavalry as scouts to see what the Confederates were doing in their retreat. He wanted to make sure he knew he had eyes on them. He knew what they were doing.
Yeah, I'm sure he wanted to try to cut them off.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And he actually feared exactly what Chris said. The Confederates were going to end up in these mountains. They were going to fortify the passes, and they were going to make it impossible for the Union to pursue them.
Mhm.
The cavalry with General Judson Kilpatrick, I mentioned earlier, he's the one under Custer, was sent southwest on a reconnaissance mission, essentially, following along behind the Confederate retreat to see where they were going, find out what they were doing, figure out if they were going to try to stop in these mountains. At the time, the Confederate Army wagon trains were passing through South Mountain. The Union Cavalry Division under Kilpatrick rode into Emmitsburg, Maryland. Emmitsburg is 7 miles southeast of the Monterey Pass.
Okay.
So,
That actually, that tells me
yeah,
where that is. Okay.
kind of helps you get an idea. So they were like 7 miles behind the the Confederates at this point.
Wow. Only 7 miles. Wow.
Yeah. So this was like a tight, they were really, and I think as well, some of like kind of what I was reading between the lines here was they were putting some heat on the Confederates.
Mhm.
And something that I learned one of the sources I used is the American Battlefield Trust has a series of YouTube videos that go over all these battles, and they're expert historians in the Civil War and different battlefields across America. If you think about it, the Confederates were pretty surrounded by this time. Maybe not close, but there were troops in Gettysburg, troops in Harrisburg. There were troops down in West Virginia at Harper's Ferry. So they kind of had like a big ring around them. They were putting the heat on them. Like, if you stop, we're going to get you.
Well, and even with the rocky terrain, I would imagine for like, if it's just a couple of people on fairly fresh horses, it's not like at the 100 paces I do. Minx and I at our top gallops hit like 18, 19, 20 miles an hour, which is terrifying. Like we were pointing out, that's not far behind.
No.
They were
That's
it was
close.
tight quarters.
I mean, a good cannon could get very close to them.
Sure.
Get like to the back line.
Sure.
So.
At Emmitsburg, Kilpatrick was ordered to attack the Confederate wagon train that was heading towards Monterey Pass. Goal was to capture the supply wagons as well as cutting off the Confederate retreat. At this point, the Union scouts, the cavalry that were sent on this mission to stop the wagon train, got a warning. I've seen 2 versions of this story. And I think I'm slightly more tempted to believe the second one, but I'm going to give you both here. Because I've seen this first. So the first version I read on one of the historical markers at the Monterey Pass battlefield itself, as well as it was discussed in the American Battlefield Trust video. Around midnight, so moving from the 4th of July into the 5th, Kilpatrick's unit came upon a 12-year-old girl, Hetty Zellinger. The child actually warned Kilpatrick that there was a Confederate wagon train near the Monterey Inn, which is located close to that pass. The trooper supposedly pulled the child up into his saddle and had her ride along with them so she could show them the way to find the enemy. Which I'm like, you took a 12-year-old girl into a battle.
I know, right? I was like, that is
I don't
kidnapping.
That
Times were different.
I know, truly. But it's midnight. this is a 12-year-old child. And it's weird because this was on this Battlefield Trust video as well as on this historical marker in Monterey Pass.
So did they grab her, or was she like, hey, let me up there, I'll show you how to get there?
What they kind of described it in the video is like, hey, you want to ride along with us and show us the way? And she was like, yeah. The second version of this is on the actual Monterey Pass Park website, which makes this even more confusing to me because they're telling two different versions of this. So the second version is that in the evening of the 4th, a farmer named Charles H. Berman rode out to try and find any Union soldiers who may be around. He had heard that the retreat from Gettysburg was happening and had information about what was going on at the top of this pass, in the pass. Like, he knew the Confederates were there. And he was successful in finding one of Custer's scouts, and he informed them, hey, this Confederate wagon train is at the top of this mountain. It's going through the pass. And as I said, I'm a little more tempted to believe that version because there's just a lot left unsaid with the thought of a child. For one, like, why is a child out at midnight? And what happened to her at the battle? There's once the story is over.
Where did she go? Yeah.
Where'd she go? Did they put her in? I guess they could have put her in the inn to take cover. She just kind of disappears out of
history.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I do think a lot of times, like, the more romanticized, sensationalized versions of events end up in the histories, even if they're not true.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So, like I said, I'm a little more tempted to believe the version of, like, this farmer. Yeah. And, he has a horse. He rode out. He could easily, even if he showed them the way, he could then, once the action got a little too hot, he'd be like, all right, I'm out. And he could ride away.
That I believe more than the
so,
girl. But you're right. I mean, they like to fantasize these things.
And like I said, I'm not trying to say one side is right, one side is wrong. I genuinely don't know. I'm just saying this is the side I'm a little more tempted to believe. Either way, they received a warning and started heading towards this wagon train. Meanwhile, back to the Confederates. Confederate troops under Captain Emack had been setting up defenses along the Mariah Furnace Road to defend themselves against a Union attack. Makes sense. Confederate Captain William Tanner noticed that the eastern portion of the mountain near Monterey Pass hadn't been guarded, so he ordered a single cannon to be set up there while the rest of the battery kept moving. This cannon was unloaded in front of a building that would come to be known as the Claremont House.
Oh, wow.
And faced the tiny village of Fountaindale.
Is that still there?
I honestly am not sure.
It's ringing a bell in my head as like a haunted location.
I mean, honestly, probably.
Maybe I'm thinking something else, but I'm like, this sounds like it's ringing a bell in my head for some reason.
Yes. We've kind of got the movements. I'm going to move on to the battle itself in the first clash here.
Okay.
So Custer's brigade with Kilpatrick, those men, reached the base of the mountain at dusk. And the Cav Division, the 5th Michigan, began starting up the hill. As the 5th Michigan advanced, Captain Tanner's men fired a cannon blast directly into their front, and this started just pandemonium. From there, 2 more cannon shots were fired, and a small squad of Confederates attacked, and the Federal soldiers were forced to fall back. Captain Emack was worried about another attack from the Union, so he ordered his forces to reposition near the Monterey Inn. If I understood correctly, the cannon from Tanner's men was also repositioned around there as well. Emack was also worried about the wagon train reaching the turnpike, because if they reached that turnpike and the Union broke through, they were going to be a lot more risk of, like, they capture these wagons, they could destroy these wagons, take prisoners. So he himself rode back to the wagon train that had not crossed through the pass yet to stop them. He then turned around and rode to the wagons in the front of the train that were already making their way, and they were like, get moving. You need to get out of here. Go, go, go. The goal here was to try and lose as few wagons as possible and to have the road clear when the Union eventually broke through. However, General Jones, who we talked about a little earlier, overrode this order for the wagons to stop. He was worried that if the flow of traffic stopped, all of the wagons could be lost versus only a few of them being lost. And he was like, I would rather lose a couple than lose the whole train.
Yeah.
Were the wagons mostly supplies, or were they injured people, or?
Largely wounded.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, the vast majority of the
That's what I
wagons were carrying wounded.
Okay.
Yeah. So while this was all happening, Custer's brigade was reorganizing and once again ascended to the top of the mountain.
Mm.
And the fighting that followed was, as I said, pandemonium. That's the word of the day. Just a reminder, it's dumping down rain. It is thundering. It is lightning. It is dark as pitch.
Miserable.
It is just awful conditions. Not that any conditions are good to fight a battle in, but like, dang. There were moments where the soldiers could only tell where the enemy was located when the lightning would flash, as well as from the muzzle blasts
Mhm.
from the
Cannons,
cannons
yeah.
or or not the muskets, but the guns. From here, I don't want to go into too much detail of the fighting. There's a lot more detail on the Monterey Pass website of like what all the different brigades and whatnot were doing at this time.
Mm-hmm.
It's very hard to keep track of it all.
Yeah.
Even as someone who likes to study this stuff, it's like, holy cow, what happened?
Yeah, you get confused names. So I'm going to kind of just do like a quick overview of some big points. So the Battlefield Trust video described this battle as kind of snowballing rather than being one big clash. So they met and then more troops were deployed.
Mm-hmm.
And more troops were deployed. And like on the Union side, more troops were showing up. Because remember, this was kind of like a reconnaissance mission that turned into a big fight.
Battle. Yeah.
So more people would show up and more people would show up. And then people, I'm assuming on the wagon train, were sent forward to show up. And like it kind of really just escalated and
Mm-hmm.
started kind of small and then mushroomed.
One thing I'll throw into that, it's my understanding that when the Union started to hit the Confederate wagon train, they very quickly just rolled up the wagon train from the rear, just pushing forward. And there were guards on the wagon train, but they were very sparsely armed. Very limited ammunition, very few arms, that sort of thing. And the guards were just being continuously forced back and basically having to abandon wagons and drivers and wounded as they went, trying to save their own necks while trying to hold off the Union as long as they could. But they were just completely and utterly overwhelmed and just completely pushed back very, very quickly.
At some point during the battle, General Kilpatrick, on the Union side again, ended up taking the east side of the mountain. And around 3 a.m., Custer's men attacked Captain Emack, so the 1st Maryland, 1st Confederate Maryland. This left Emack wounded, and he ended up with shell wounds, gunshot wounds, and saber wounds.
Did he survive?
I think he did. If I understood correctly. I don't know for certain, but I was like, holy crap, dude.
Wow.
That's awful. General Jones eventually ordered couriers and staff officers, as well as any wounded that were able to fire a gun, to get into the fighting during the worst of it. Because again, they were just getting hit. And at one point, General Custer, trigger warning, this makes me sad. At one point, General Custer's horse was shot.
Oh no.
Yeah. And the Union, we're all like,
we all reacted worse to that. We're like, oh.
Like,
but the thousands of Confederates,
men.
it's no problem, right?
But I think a thing is, and I've had this thought before of like, it's not that people, and I don't think we're the only ones that think like this, right? It's not that we're not sympathetic towards the people.
Right.
Animals
are innocent.
Genuinely, they don't understand what wars are. They don't understand. All they understand is, ouch, something just hit me in the side and now I'm hurting. Yeah. And it's just like, oh. So to clarify, we have sympathy for the men. We're not trying to be like, oh, whatever. I feel like, especially when you're an animal lover, it hits a little differently.
Oh, breaks my heart.
It does. So
did they have any like memorials or things to the animals that died in the Civil War?
They did. There was one in Gettysburg not that long ago.
Was there?
I feel.
That's exactly what I know.
Well, not long ago. Might have been like a year or so.
But like, are there any memorial statues or monuments of like,
Well, there is the statue of General Longstreet on his horse.
Well, I mean, a lot of the generals are though, but there's nothing like this. This is for all the horses that were killed or all the dogs.
I feel like there is. I can't remember off the top of my head. I'm 99% positive that there is something somewhere.
Yeah, that's good. Anyways,
yes.
Sorry. Didn't mean to get us off topic there.
It's okay. So
That's a really good question.
yeah.
I mean, what did they do when when the horses died? Like, did
They
they?
probably just left them
They
there.
left them
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Have you ever seen the pictures?
Tristle.
There's just pictures of it just being like dead animal, trigger warning. There's just pictures of just dead horses.
Just
Or-
gruesome. Yeah.
No, anyway, so about the horse, Custer's horse got shot.
Yes, I'm sorry. So
No, you're fine.
his horse was shot, and the Union started to get kind of bogged down.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, the 1st West Virginia Cavalry and part of the 1st Ohio were sent forward to help. And a group of West Virginians charged, I think they were talking about specifically Tanner's cannon here.
Mm-hmm.
They charged and shoved it down the side of the mountain. They got it out of there.
Really?
Yes. At this point, they also started destroying wagons and taking prisoners.
Mm-hmm.
At one point, sharpshooters from the 1st North Carolina Battalion and 6th Virginia Cav got into the fight. And this time, they did stop the wagons on their way from Fairfield. I think these were wagons that were back farther. Because this wagon trail, you got to think, was miles long.
Yeah.
So I think these were
Miles.
Yeah.
Miles.
Oh, I imagine.
like
I mean,
what
it's-
this like 9.
It was 9
10
miles of wagon train destroyed. 9 miles
Wow.
destroyed.
That's not. I think the overall length was like 21 miles
Right.
end to end. It was huge.
Right. So when they called this North Carolina division, I think that was at the point they were towards the rear, and I'm assuming this is how I'm reading it in my mind. They were like, okay, don't get into this. Stop here. We're relatively safe here. Wait.
And the North Carolina was famous. Like,
Mhm.
I mean, they were great sharpshooters. and-
Sharpshooters. Yep.
yeah, they were pretty powerful
Mm-hmm.
to contend with,
Right. So
if I remember correctly.
yeah, they stopped the wagons, and then the Union cavalry managed to break through Confederate defenses by 3:30 a.m. and also again started attacking these wagons. And this is where the animal death particular trigger warning comes in. This got really ugly.
So there's going to be a trigger warning for being burned alive, essentially?
Yeah.
Okay.
As you can imagine, they started overturning wagons. Some of them they set on fire. They sacked the line. And
A lot of them were set on fire.
my
Most of the
goodness.
train was actually burned.
yeah.
Living souls and all.
I was
It
gonna
was
say
really
that-
bad.
And animals, like we said, were also part of this, in particular the horses. Naturally, they panicked.
Yeah.
And whether they were in the traces, whether they had riders, whether they were just running free, because you got to think riders were falling off, and it was just insanity. It just pandemonium.
By
And-
in the traces, Christiana means they were attached to the wagons.
Yes, sorry. Thank you for that. If they panicked, they just started running,
Mhm.
and we're on a mountain. So they were sliding down the mountain.
Yeah.
They were going over cliff faces. And again, we're in a freaking rain, just thunderstorm. Like, this is just a horrific.
And the
Surprised it didn't start a wildfire. All
Truly.
those fires.
Well, because of all the
rain.
rain
all the
probably helped with that,
Yeah.
sure.
But jeez,
This
you can
is-
probably see it from miles.
Yeah, and hear it.
And this is these aren't small mountains.
No,
Like these are.
this is a
It's
big,
big.
yeah,
it's
yeah.
it's a good sized mountain to get up.
It's part of the Appalachian, right?
I believe so, yeah. Or like
Yeah.
an offshoot of the Appalachian Range.
Yeah,
Because
it's part of the Appalachian Mountains.
Because the trail runs through. Michaux is a state park in Franklin, Adams County. It's in this area. It's in that area.
So the Appalachian
Yeah.
Trail, it actually crosses modern day Route 16, which was the turnpike back then.
Okay.
It crosses the old turnpike 800 yards away from where
Oh.
the Monterey Inn is, and where a lot of the fighting actually took place. So yeah, it's very, very close to the actual scene of the fighting.
Wow.
Interesting.
Is the Monterey Inn
Still there?
I think it is.
We could go on a car. Oh,
I was gonna
oh,
say
never
field
mind.
trip.
Not gonna say that word. There's too many dogs in the house. Tarride.
Yes.
Field trip.
Field
I'm
trip.
gonna look it up.
Something strange field trip. Perfect. Yeah.
Monterey Inn, you said?
I'm looking it
Monterey
up.
Everyone's looking it up. That would be cool.
While you guys are looking that up, I'm going to finish up. I'm almost done here. Just before daybreak, several more Confederate troops arrived on the scene, which did eventually force Kilpatrick, the Union cavalryman, to give up the fight in Monterey Pass itself. they withdrew from the pass. And if I understood correctly, essentially this fight kind of continued and petered out eventually into Maryland, into the town of Ringgold, and kind of all along those trains there. He did eventually finally order the cavalry to halt, and they burned any of the remaining wagons that were in there, destroyed them.
Ruins.
Oh, well, still,
Let's
that's
go to the ruins.
yeah. Field trip, friends. The battle finally ended around dawn on July 5th. That is the pass story. That is the very confusing, complex history of the Battle of Monterey Pass. It's a very brief overview of it. If you guys want more information, listeners, like I said, we always link our resources. By all means, check out the Monterey Pass website. Check out the battlefield itself. It's a neat little place to hike. They do have a small museum that's there. I believe they're open April through October. Because I wanted to go through the museum when Chris and I went, and it was closed.
You'll just have to go back.
Yeah, I do.
How much does
want
it cost to visit the
I
museum?
think the museum is free.
Yeah,
Oh,
I think
okay,
it's
nice.
free.
Like the one in Gettysburg is like $30.
Yeah. No, this is it's very tiny. It's kind of like visitor center.
Okay.
Kind of esque. It reminded
Do
me.
they have books? Like a bookstore? Or?
That I don't know.
Probably.
Probably.
Yeah.
But yeah, check it out. Like I said, it's a good place to hike. We found out when we went, apparently you can take horses there.
Really?
Yeah,
We should do that.
Yeah, so we can go trail riding up there and give them the support if you feel like you can.
It's a small preservation group, and small preservation groups always need the support. They always need purchases in their store or donations, volunteers, anything like that. It's a cool site.
It is. It's really neat. So, and if it's okay, there is a little short story I would love for Chris to tell.
Following the fight up at Monterey and the wagon trains getting down off of the mountain, they briefly kind of split, and a portion almost went into Waynesboro. They kind of skirted around the east edge of the town before they headed south down towards Leitersburg. And they stopped at a farm there outside of Waynesboro, and that farm is still there today. It's owned by some very close friends of mine. I get in there once or twice a week, and it's family owned. It's been there since like the 1840s or 1850s. The family knew of the battle going on up at the mountain. They heard the Confederates coming down the road, and they got their animals a ways away from the farm to keep them protected, because otherwise they would have lost their animals and such. And they went down into the cellar of the farmhouse to hide. They could hear the Confederates like in the house, basically looking for food or anything like that. And they had a well out front. Finally, after all the noise stopped and they could tell no one was there, they went upstairs. They found all the cupboards empty, so forth and so on. But there was one item sitting on the kitchen table, and it was a cap and ball revolver that was left by one of the Confederates basically as payment for the loss of all this personal property, food and such. And also, I guess, kind of as a loss for the well out front. The well had been completely drained by all the soldiers filling their canteens. And it's kind of cool. My friend, who's a direct descendant of the family who was living there,
wow,
he still has that gun and I think some other things. And like the old well is still out front. It's covered up, but like you can walk up to it and such. Yeah, it's just kind of a neat little story that I've been told that happened right there, that happened immediately after the fight up at Monterey.
Passed down through their family.
Wow.
And so that gun's been, like, that's so cool. That's such an interesting
Did
story.
you see the gun?
Oh yeah. Oh, I've held it.
Oh wow.
Yep.
That's cool.
Yep, they still have it. It's in good condition. Like they take care of it. And it's stayed in their family for over 160 years.
So I'm curious if it gives off any energy.
Oh, I couldn't tell you. I don't know now.
All right, friends. Do you guys have any closing thoughts about Monterey Pass? Or
I just find it so fascinating. Like, like you said earlier, there's people that could be brothers and fighting each other, father and son, always disagreeing. And, but when you look at it, it's all human.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just an animal. And it's tragic that, that happened, that whole Civil War even happened.
Yeah,
but,
truly.
I'm very, fascinated by what I learned. And I wonder if anybody tried to how I remember this one story, maybe we can talk about it in another episode sometime, there was like an angel of a hill in the Civil War. There was a Civil War, and he saw all these people. He was like in the Union, I think, and he saw all these Confederate people dying, and the Union guy went out there with his water and started giving everybody water.
So
And
that
they called
was
him the Angel of. It's one of the final battles that they.
no, that was 1862 Battle of Fredericksburg.
That's it. Was it? I might have had it the wrong way, but I think that'd be a cool thing to look at. Like
Yeah.
that, like kind of go through all the different battles. Like that'd be neat.
Yeah.
I can't remember. I know I can pick. There's a famous painting of it.
Of it.
That's what I'm trying to remember. I can't remember.
Okay, sorry, I digress. But
Oh, it's okay. But it you're right though. Like that's what always gets me about like the humans. It's that side of like wars and
yeah,
And I do think there are unfortunately certain wars. The biggest one, and of course I reenact this era, is the one that comes to my mind is World War II. Because that's an easier one almost to think about because it's like there was very clearly an evil. But in so many other wars like this, it's just humans, man. Like this is literally like that
brother and brother.
Brother and brother, and I think that story reminds me in World War One. It's trench warfare. There, the one Christmas there was a Christmas truce, and
They sang Silent Night.
They sang Silent Night, and the French and German soldiers they went out and they were literally playing soccer. Did you find?
Yeah, Mary's Heights is
Mary's
what
Heights.
you were talking about.
Okay.
I thought that's what it was. It's just I was having a moment,
Oh, you're
Fine.
fine.
but
But thank you for looking that up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But was it a Union?
so it was a Union assault on a well-defended Confederate position,
Yes.
and
that's right.
they kept just beating the Union back, and it was like shooting fish in a barrel. Is honestly what it was like, and the Union dead were so thick on the ground that they were literally like able to walk across the ground without touching grass,
Ugh.
and a Confederate soldier jumped the stone wall and was out there giving water to some of the dying Union.
Yeah.
Oh my
But that was
God.
the Battle of Fredericksburg in December of 1862.
Okay. Thank you.
That just like brought a lump to my throat.
I know.
Like,
Yeah.
just Any other thoughts from you guys or?
Like I said, I didn't know a whole lot about this ahead of time. And now that we've gone through that, I think it's wild that it's not more known about. It's just the amount of like horror in less than a 24-hour, less than a 12-hour.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Period.
it's never been brought up. I'd never read about it in history or
Yeah.
American
It's
AP US history. Never brought to my attention.
Obscure battle.
Yeah, the one of the unfortunate things is with Civil War history is there were so many little battles like this that are just overlooked or overshadowed by the big battles. And it's kind of cool, being a local that you can go there and see where all this happened. It's not preserved in the sense of like the Gettysburg battlefield, but most of it is still there. Like you can still walk the old Mariah Furnace Road and stuff like that.
Wow.
It's just overshadowed.
Is it? So I think I mentioned this before. I'm interested in what you guys think. So I went to Antietam a couple years ago, and like going there was weird because I would see the names of some of the like on both sides, right? And I'm like, oh, I know what happens to you very soon.
Yeah.
Was there like that kind of feeling? Oh, you got out of Gettysburg and now
Now you're going, here you are.
Yeah.
Well, I guess the big one that came to my mind was Ewell.
Yeah.
Because we talked about him pretty heavily in the Gettysburg episode. And just be like, oh man. I think the biggest thing for me is like, God, you just got out of this horrendous battle.
Yeah.
And now here we are. Like,
Again.
Like, you've got to be so...
One thing kind of ties in with that. So like with Custer was involved up at Monterey Pass.
How old was he at Monterey Pass? Do we know?
Early 20s, I think.
Okay,
Wow.
because then he went after the Indian.
Yeah, so that would have been 1876, so just over 10 years later. We all know what happened at the Little Bighorn.
Yeah.
Just one last stand, Custer, and then you can go home. Because of things that Custer was responsible for at places like Monterey Pass and other battles later in the war, when he finally lost his hair out in the Dakotas, a lot of people were like, that guy had it coming. He was deserving of that. There was a lot of people who didn't really care that
Custer got his ass kicked.
Custer got scalped in 1876.
When you said lost his hair, I was like, wait, I'm assuming I think I know what that means, but I wasn't certain.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was scalped.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Aw.
Questions. What drew you to this topic?
So I knew the Battle of Monterey Pass and that it occurred directly after the Battle of Gettysburg, but I didn't know very much detail about it.
Mhm.
And I just wanted to look more into it because I feel like I talk fairly frequently. I think the small parts of history are just as important as big parts, and I want to talk about it.
Definitely.
Was there anything you wish you could have researched more into? Which is an ironic question, and we're going to talk about why in a second.
Yeah. In a sense, yeah. But in another sense, sort of no. Like, and when I say that, it's because I feel like I got a pretty good overview of the battle. But there were certain details that I'd like to clarify. But I think that would also lead me to becoming like, you'd almost have to become like a licensed battlefield guide to get all the detail and to know everything because
Sure.
it's just so complex. So it's part of me like wants to dig deeper, and the other part of me is like, don't go down that rabbit hole because you will never get out of it.
What did you find the most strange about this topic?
How confusing it was. Like some of the details just seemed like muddled. The story of the little girl. Wait a minute, was it a little girl that warned the Union, or was it an adult farmer?
Yeah.
Like, was it a dude farmer?
I want to give some additional thoughts and context on this episode. This episode is fairly related to our Gettysburg episode, which was number three back in November.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that we are thinking about, and if you are still with us at this point, thank you,
Yes.
is having kind of snapshot episodes, diving a little bit deeper into things that were rabbit holes that we wanted to chase in earlier episodes.
Mm-hmm.
So listeners, if you like this, please let us know. In a couple seconds, I'm going to give you information on how to contact us. If you have a suggestion for a strange or mysterious topic, a comment about an episode, or want to give us feedback on the snapshots, or just want to chat, please reach out. You can comment directly on episodes on Spotify, leave a review on either Spotify or Apple Podcast. So if you're reviewing on Apple, whatever you write is for the entire podcast.
Mm.
Spotify, you can put comments or reviews for individual episodes or the podcast as a whole.
Right.
So you can comment or review, give stars, those types of things.
Right.
You can also find us on Amazon Music and Audible, YouTube,
The Tube of You.
the tube of you.
We're at something_strange pod on YouTube.
Yep, so you can subscribe and comment there. You can also find us on Instagram at something_strangepod. You can send us an email at somethingstrangepod24@gmail.com.
Truly, reach out. We want to hear from you guys. Seriously, we love you. We do this for you. You guys put us where we're at. So, well, strangers, it's time for us once again to part ways. I'm Christiana.
Until we meet again, keep your wagons guarded. I'm Bree.
I'm Jacob.
I'm Chris.
We'll be back again soon with another
Something Strange.